Mhm. Welcome to the History of LA Ska one-on-one sessions. I'm Junor Francis. Now, this series celebrates the ska, rocksteady, and vintage reggae scenes in Southern California and way beyond through insightful conversations with legends and modern-day players, including those behind the scene. And so many people working behind the scene, we just couldn't list them. This is the 26th one-on-one sessions and our 11th in this new podcast series, a podcast YouTube channel format, thanks to the ongoing support that we get from all our fans worldwide. Today, we welcome a gentleman who played a vital role behind the scenes right here in Los Angeles, as it's been often referred to as the entertainment capital. He has played a vital role from way back as 1980. Please help us welcome Howard Paar, Unclub creator, author, and award-winning music supervisor. Howard, along with fellow author Marc Wasserman, will be participating in a very special and intimate event at the GRAMMY Museum in Los Angeles on October the 23rd. And we're respectfully asking you to scratch the date down, October the 23rd, that we'll be talking more about during this interview. Howard, thanks for joining us. How are you today, sir?
Honor to be on. You know what a big fan of yours I am, mate. You started 2020.
You're having me blushing, man.
So, anyway, thank you. It's fun to be with you.
Yes, man, wonderful. Well, your resume is so extensive. I needed a month to read it, not just a couple of hours. I said, how can you come from England and accomplish so much, man? This is unbelievable. So tell us though, born and raised in London?
Yeah.
The city that sits on the Thames River.
Indeed.
Yes, sir. So what was your youth like growing up in London? What was it like?
I grew up like right on the outskirts of the East End. So it's like, you know what London's like? It's like 12 miles from Piccadilly Circus. You're in the countryside, you know what I mean? So I was in that sort of area. And, you know, went to local schools there, what have you. I mean, in terms, it was a sort of, it was kind of interesting neighborhood. It was right on the border. And I remember, I don't know why I remember this, but when I was doing like a paper route, as you call it here, when I'm like 12 or something, to make some money to buy records, like the people on my route were like Bobby Moore, who was like the England football captain. It was all these East End guys. Then there were like the Carbon Paper Gang, who were like these gangsters who have made it rich and had a nice place up there, and Uriah Heep were a rock band. So, you know, it was just this, you're on the outskirts of all this stuff, but you were feeling London, you know, the heart of it very much. And, you know, really everything sort of just hit for me when music really flew into my life, you know, as a single digit kid, you know, and that was really the catalyst for everything.
And speaking of music, what music hit you the most as a youngster?
Very young. The first stuff I would say would be, you know, not shocking that, you know, a lot of the English bands that were popping along at the time, you know, all the, you know, the sort of the kind of obvious Stones, Beatles, Kinks, Small Faces. But then, funnily enough, Millie Small obviously had My Boy But Lollipop in '64. So that was like the first taste of the music that sort of came to drive my life for, you know, a long period. And then really the soul stuff. Stax there was a TV show called Ready, Steady, Go in England, which I think, well, I know it's available on DVD video. You can just find it on YouTube. It was like the coolest music show I've ever seen in my life. And they brought over all the Stax guys, men and women, to play. And that was a huge changer.
And Stax is my favorite label, really.
Yeah, me too.
American label. Hey.
right. Yeah, no, exactly.
Yes, no kidding.
Without a doubt. And the interesting thing about it, I mean, just to sort of, since you love it as much as I do, was many years later, when I went to work at Polygram Records, I met the Memphis Horns, who were like, you know, gods to me, you know, and became very dear friends with Wayne Jackson, the trumpet player, until he sad passing a few years ago. But what he told me that was fascinating about that, and I think really speaks to like a lot of stuff about being a kid in England in that era especially was that, you know, we just assumed they were huge in America, and they weren't. Like, they were big in Memphis, but the love that went back and forwards with Stax in England, he said it was like astonishing for them. You know, it was like the whole world opened up for them after coming over and doing those shows and being on that show in a way that they just hadn't had before. So, you know, the soul side of it just stayed. It still is. I mean, I listen to so much vintage soul. You know, a lot of it WWOZ these days. I don't know if you ever listened to that station, but there's some great DJs on there playing old vinyl. Like, you'll never know all the soul songs, right? I mean, you get to a point where I was like, oh yeah, I know all that stuff. But no, you're never going to.
You can't.
Which is great, I mean.
Yes, sir, you can. So you moved to Los Angeles and never returned?
Pretty much, yeah.
Why was that so?
Well, this was, I mean,
besides the weather.
Yeah, right. No kidding, right? I mean, what happened was, it was kind of ironic. But in 76, London was just going, it was horrendous. You know what I mean? You've got the sort of conservative government, sort of just pre-Thatcher. You'd got, you know, the forced strike. You know, they were trying to break unions, so there was that horror show going on, and there'd be mandatory power outage. I mean, it's funny, we're getting a lot of those here now, but back then it was like there'd be days of it, there'd be certain days of the week and stuff. It was crazy. And then, you know, you'd walk into town or go to work or whatever, and there were like IRA letter bombs being randomly dropped on people. And it was just a weird time. And what happened was, Freddie Laker, this guy, entrepreneur, started an airline, basically cheap airline. LA to London, round trip, £200 back in that era, which was a lot, but it was reachable suddenly for a kid like me, where it never would have been before, you know?
Right.
I had to book way in advance. I think like 6-7 months on these tickets. So I booked it, you know, at some point, you know, mid to late 76. And I was like tossed up. There was like a suit I really wanted at this place that made the coolest suits. I was like, oh, this is it. So I bought the ticket, and then punk happened. Like, right? It was like, I mean, I would say it hadn't been a brewing, but the bands really suddenly would start to play. And, you know, there'd been bands like Eddie and the Hot Rods and those kind of precursors, Dr. Feelgood, that had an edge that was missing, you know, but a lot of the big British bands had obviously migrated, Tax Exile, whatever, and they were all just removed from us. Everything felt very removed. So the irony was, right when London was becoming really like, the early part of 77 was crazy, you know, and I came over here spring 77, right after all the Bill Grundy, Sex Pistols stuff. That was right I think it was about right in the aftermath of that. But I just fell in love with Los Angeles, you know, when I got here, and I really I never left.
Wow. So speaking about falling in love, what was the music scene like upon your arrival here?
You know, on the surface, it was horrifying. You know, I mean, it felt like getting in a bad time machine. Like and growing up in England, I don't know about when you were growing up, but we just were always hearing like FM radio was great. And you get here and it was all Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, you know what I mean? Led Zeppelin was like, we'd forgotten about Led Zeppelin, you know what I mean? So the surface of it was horrible. But underneath the surface, once you got into it, there was some interesting bands around. I mean, the nascent sort of LA punk thing was going on. And so there was there was the Sunset Strip side of it, which, to be honest with you, was a laugh, you know what I mean? It's kid coming over, like, it was wild, you know, and it was like cheap, easy, we just had a good time. I mean, it was just playground, you know, so I had the best time. On the music front, you know, and there were good, you know, there were a few good, I mean, the first show I ever saw in the US was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers at the Whiskey with this local band, The Quick, who I came to love, opening for them. So there's stuff like that. And the great thing about LA that ended up being a bonus was that all the English bands that I loved were I got here and they all were coming here too. So you'd see them at places like the Whiskey, primarily the Roxy, and they'd do 2 shows a night in these pretty small clubs where some of them would already be playing like, you know, theaters or, you know, bigger, you know, Santa Monica Civic type places. So you were seeing this phenomenal music from England and you were here. And it was actually fine, you know. But a lot of what I was excited about, to be honest, was what was coming here more than what was here, with a few significant exceptions, you know.
Right. So what was it like for you leaving your family, friends, perhaps your parents at that time, and coming here? You came by yourself with, you said, very little money.
Yeah. It was an adventure, you know, and I just, you know, honestly, I left home very young. I started work. I went to, you know, couldn't wait to leave school. Like, school in England was horrifying.
I think school everywhere is. But
right? I mean, all the sort of,
even though it's needed.
I mean, you know, it was like the whole thing of the, you know, I mean, look, I was just driven by music, and you know, and don't get me wrong, like I went to work at a PR company in Soho at 16, and you know, and actually, in a weird way, career stuff started great, and I got really good opportunities and was enjoying it up to a point, but yeah, it was, and no, it's really hard to explain. Like, I was ready for something else. And I think that the Clash in particular sort of galvanized me and a lot of people, not just musicians, but other people, to like, this is blank horrible. Get up and do something with your life. Don't sit around and complain about it. Go up and do something. And my form of doing that ended up being here, where there was, look, when you first get here, there's a certain cynicism, I'll be honest, like as an English kid, and people are like, everything's great. And you're like, you know, it was a little, you know, the have a nice day of it was sort of jarring to a point. But then I realized there's an optimism here. You know, I mean,
how about your parents? Did they give you their blessings, or did they discourage you?
I don't think they knew I did. I mean, to be honest, I was not a great teenager. You know, I wasn't really listening to anything. The only person I listened to is my uncle, who had been overseas, and great guy. Also took me to my first Man United match when I was 12, which I never know whether to thank him or curse him for all that emotional upheaval for the rest of my life. But no, I love him. But he said to me one thing before I left, and he was like, look, just bear in mind, no one invited you. So don't go there complaining because, I don't know, you know, there's guns or there's this or that, or there's no health insurance, whatever. It's like, just go. And if you don't like it, leave, but don't go over there sitting around being English and complaining about it. And he was the only guy I listened to. And I was like, I always believed that, you know, and I just had a great time with it. And, you know, the point being that even if the positivity wasn't hugely, you know, from the depths of sincerity about stuff with every single person here, you know, again, jumping forward a little bit, but like, let's just say, for example, we're talking about the club, right? If I'd said I was going to do that with no money whatsoever in London,
would never happen.
People will give you 10, everyone will be like, give you 10, 20 reasons, oh, that one never happened. You know, it's that air. And, you know, at that age, you know, I was so convinced, but also it's nice to have that atmosphere around you where people are like, yeah, let's, you know, why not? And that's what I loved about Los Angeles. Plus, for me, the noir side of it, the architecture, I grew up reading like all the kind of Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, you know, all those great noir authors and the old films, the 40s stuff that I love so much. And it was still sort of here a little bit. So I had all that really, you know, I was caught up in it. And it was it was just different. It was, you know, you couldn't get more different really than London and LA. And it was just, I mean, you know, how old were you when you came over? Well, not how old, you know.
I was, early to mid 20s. So
Right.
I made like 5 trips. The longest I've stayed was 21 days in London. My dad lived in Clapham.
Yeah.
And he was just a few, I guess, miles from Brixton.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So I went enough that I could drive. I could drive around. And then you know to catch the bus because my dad worked on the bus. So I was always on the bus. So I had a key for his house. I would just I wouldn't tell him I'm coming. So he'd come home and hey, somebody leave the door open. Is somebody in the house? That was me. So I made a few trips there. So I traveled, I would say, quite a bit around. I was there when the punk scene was coming into being.
Yeah.
I was there when Bob Marley was supposed to make that first trip. I was moved to tears when I saw big, this is after context now, you know, big banner of Bob Marley coming.
Oh man, me
and
too.
they said, it's going to be an upscale place, a big place, you know, not in the ghetto. I said, wow, reggae music is taking off in London.
Right? I remember seeing him at Earl's Court in London.
Say it again?
I saw him play at Earl's Court in London.
Right. So that was 76 or 75?
Yeah, it might have been. I think it was, you know, it was in that minute. I remember.
Yeah.
I remember like, I would say 75 probably.
Right. Okay. So I was there just before his arrival. And there were placards, I'd never seen for a reggae show in New York. But there was everywhere, all over London. Big banners said, wow, reggae from Jamaica.
Yeah. I mean, that was like you know, I think, yeah, I mean, it was, honestly, to me, it was great, but it wasn't a surprise because it just felt.
Well, for me, it was right, because I'd never seen that.
Right? There, you know?
Yes.
Years, you know, really going back to 72, I think, you know, in truth. With Marley, that is, you know.
Right. So I after the end of the 80s, I haven't been back, which is unfortunate. But I was talking to a friend yesterday and I really want to revisit London.
Yes. I went back a lot for a period, especially when I was working at a label, because, you know, there were offices there. So I would go on work and then just extend outwards, you know, through the 90s a lot. But yeah, I mean, I actually really love London right now.
Oh, yes. I loved it back then too. Just for the cold. It was always almost cold.
Yeah.
I've only gone there September. I usually go in the summertime because after September it's really cold, and I didn't think that I want to go from New York, where it's very cold, in the wintertime to a place. So always in the summertime. So I've never experienced winter in London, but a lot of rain. You never, the cloud, you'll be walking nice day and the cloud just open and rain.
I'll tell you, like, maybe this is such silly shit to get into, excuse me, but like the rain thing, I remember the day, actually, pretty well now, it just brought it back to me when I was like, I got to get out of here. And I'd got like this new suit, I think, from Granny Takes a Trip, this cool like rock and roll clothing place. And I was walking down, I was living in East London at this point. Me and some friends got a house when I was about 16, 17, something like that. And so I'm walking down the street to the tube station, and it's, you know, it's probably about a mile. Got my umbrella out, got this nice cool suit on, I'm feeling good, you know what I mean? And then the umbrella blows, literally it's so windy on top of it, the umbrella blows inside out, like just sort of shattered like that. And you're like, okay, so, and you're drenched. Then you get on the tube, which I'm sure you did, right? And but you just imagine in rush hour, and it's just hot and sweaty and just gross. You get there and you dry. Then you walk down to your office and you soaked again. I'm like, I gotta get out of here.
Enough is enough. And then from there you came to Los Angeles, where it doesn't rain. It doesn't rain.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Boy, we got off track, we got sidetracked. But there were several Southern California venues synonymous with Ska in the 80s. From the Reseda Country Club, Palomino, the Valley, Hollywood clubs, the Whiskey, so many clubs. Can you tell us about some of the clubs that were playing reggae? I can mention when I came here, I remember Fenders in Long Beach. And then the Unclub, and about what time the Unclub in Silver Lake came into being in relationship to the other clubs?
The Whiskey was always there, you know, and a great club. The Country Club, which was much bigger.
Yes.
The Country Club changed a lot in Los Angeles, and then Perkins Palace, I would say, because up to that point, all the bands, you know, that would come through had been playing the Whiskey or the Roxy. The Clash played the Civic, which is 3,500 people, but the rest of them, and they were doing 2 shows a night. So you'd get the first show a night was Industry, late kids, 11:30 show. And it was phenomenal to see them in small places. And it was also easy to get there. Whereas the country clubs out in the valley, Perkins Palace is, you know, Pasadena, and they were much bigger places, and because they could pay more and they were, you know, over twice the size, it sucked a lot of the business into those other venues. And the bands only had to play once a night instead of twice, right? So I'm sure they liked it, but I felt like it lost a little bit of edge at that point, you know, just a little. I mean, not that the Whiskey went out of business, don't get me wrong, I mean, they were still having bands, but I liked that. I've always loved the small club, you know.
But my impression is that people prefer to play the Whiskey because it's in the entertainment capital of the world, as opposed to on the outskirts, even though the money may be better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
is that your understanding, that people rather be in LA city center?
I think it's, look, the excitement of it, and the Whiskey. Look, we all knew what the Whiskey was as kids, you know. I mean, the Whiskey was famous. The Roxy. I didn't know about the Roxy. I came. Funny enough.
No, I meant to say the Roxy. I'm sorry.
Oh,
not the Whiskey.
Yeah, the Roxy. Yeah, the Roxy was nice. I mean, it was nice. It still is. It's really the same. You know, well, I haven't been in there lately, but last time I was there, it was pretty much the same as it's ever been, which is really nice. And, you know, of course, in London, there was the Roxy Club, which was the absolute opposite, that, you know, where Don Letts would DJ and all the punk bands.
Yes, sir.
You know, it was a very short-lived thing, but it was the best. That was the best punk moments. All my favorite punk moments are in that joint. But yeah, I think those, I don't remember a lot of reggae stuff playing here when we opened. I mean, Bob Marley had played, I feel like he played UCLA, if I remember correctly, in around, would have been probably in 1980, like when Uprising was out.
I was on the East Coast, so I wouldn't.
Yeah, but those venues, I don't remember. I mean, look, obviously, when we get into the two-tone thing, those bands, Specials and Madness, were playing Perkins Palace, but they'd all come to the Whiskey first. It was like their second trips when they came back. So the Whiskey was painted. The first time the Specials came through, I think, if I remember correctly, it was the end of '79, and was galvanized in time for me to start the club. Honestly, their label Chrysalis had done some deal with the Whiskey, and the whole place was painted checkered black and white. It was like, you walk up there, I was like, oh my God, this was like, and you know, a first time through, there was such an energy to them that I think everyone got it right away. Like, I like to think, you know, obviously I was hugely influenced by it, but you could feel it. People connected very quick to the social political stuff on there. And
right.
It just had something that, you know, to me at that point, punk was, you know, getting a little bit identikit to a degree, you know, other than Clash and, you know, certain other bands. But anyway, so that was really it. But I don't remember much reggae being in LA. I think, you know, truthfully, East Coast and other areas of this country always played more. I would say New York probably always had more reggae and soul stuff. A lot of those great soul bands, some of them that were still playing, didn't come to LA much. I mean, for whatever reasons, they weren't booked out.
Well, it's inevitable that New York would have more reggae because of the large Caribbean community.
Yeah. No, I get it. I understand it. And not to say there wasn't a community here, because a lot of, you know, there was a happy, good amount of Jamaicans would come to the Unclub, you know, so yeah. Right,
interesting. You mentioned the Unclub. So how did you meet owner Bob Silver?
Bob, what happened was my girlfriend at the time then wife, now ex-wife or whatever, Julie, someone had told her that this guy needed someone to book some punk bands. And so I went and met him, and at the Filthy McNasty's, which was this little joint, right? It's actually where the Viper Room is now. And he had got this place called the Oriental Knights, which was a Vietnamese sort of restaurant-y club thing. And it was on its last legs, basically. And he wanted someone to go in and revamp it. So I just, by this point, you know, I'd been obsessed about the Specials and Two Tones since the day the day Gangsters came out. I mean, I heard it and I was like, it was a life-changing moment for me, truthfully. I knew I wanted to do a club at that moment. And what had happened for me was that you'd go to the Whiskey or the Roxy or anywhere else in LA, and you get to see this great band, but there'd be like an old hippie DJ playing the Doobie Brothers. So you'd walk in there.
No relationship, no connection.
No relationship. You just stand there like, oh, this is awful. And then a great band would play, and then it would go back to, you know, I don't know, pick your 70s band you don't really like that much. And no offense to these bands. I mean, it would be like, honestly, I've got a soft spot for some of them now, but at the time it was just so incongruous. So what I wanted to do, and what I basically went on to a rant to Bob about, was there were also a lot of clubs at the time, like sort of Madam Wong's, these places where there'd be 5 bands a night. They'd all be just these hodgepodge bills, and it'll be like, bring people in, you know, they had to get certain numbers of people in to sell drinks and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't want to do any of that. And I don't want to do punk either. And my argument about punk at the time was that the hardcore thing had started to kick in here, which at that point was in a very sort of misogynistic, violent male, you know, it was like, you just see it. I'm like, look, you don't want this stuff. You got a club. Do you want that sort of violence every night? I don't want to be, I just don't, you know, it was really sort of, you know, it was just the crowd. Like a lot of those kids were like, you know, they'd probably been playing high school football a few months before, and now they wanted to be in a mosh pit, you know, and it was just, I just found it really boring. So I went on to a rant about him, and I go, look, this ska thing is new to people here, even though it's got a deep history. And the Specials and the two-tone thing is the most forward-thinking music. It's going to be huge, you know, and we could do 1 band a night, but play records like, you know, ska, soul, reggae, and it's going to work. I was like, look, I've seen the shows at the Whiskey, and you can feel something's going on here, and we'll be first. No one else is doing it. And, you know, truthfully, you know, look, I think he didn't know what ska was, you know what I mean? He's honest enough to admit that. But, you know, look, it was probably a mix of me just being absolutely certain. Like, I had no doubt in my mind this was going to go, right? And I was very obsessive about it and convicted. And he was kind of desperate. So, right.
So that's what we call the rightness of time, the rightness of place, the rightness of moment.
Just needed it in the moment. And so that was it. Yeah, that was the beginning.
So why did you place emphasis on ska?
You know, look, I always, you know, as a kid, I was always excited by what's next and coming, and, you know, the sounds of the new. And when the funny thing was, I was actually dressing some of those old clothes, because, I mean, going back to England, as much as I was broad in my taste, you know, I loved the ska stuff, you know, I mean, all the Trojan stuff when, you know, God, it was great. And, you know, I liked the clothing. I wasn't, some of the skinhead aspects of skinhead was not like, I'm not into, I never got my head shaved or anything, but I liked the clothes. And I was wearing that stuff weirdly, just a sort of bit of a reaction to the punk identikit thing when I first heard Gangsters. So I was like, or first saw the picture of Gangsters. you know, their press pick. So I just thought that two-tone was the most forward-thinking, but great fun. But there was stuff being said in those records. You know, they were important. I think they hit people, you know, obviously hugely in the UK, but people connected to that stuff here. You know, I mean, it drew a lot of outside mix of kids to that club very quickly. That was, you know, I never thought about it in the moment, truthfully, but looking back and people have talked to me about it, there was such a mix of people in there, all just having like an incredible time. And it was everyone. And it was the most, you know, it was the only really diverse club in LA.
Interesting.
And I don't take credit for that. The music was what was drawing people in, and we embraced it, you know, because I just wanted it to be, you know, it was fantastic.
And you know, one song that I highlighted and really inspired me, Free Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
Because the anti-apartheid movement was
yes.
an all-time high during that time.
Yeah.
So a lot of progressive DJs, if they didn't play punk or skinhead or ska or reggae, they would play that song. Everyone felt comfortable.
Interesting. Yeah, look, it was a deeply emotional song, even for, you know, some people removed from the process of what the hellish situation.
The arrangement is so captivating.
Yeah, it just pulls at you emotionally, even if you didn't know who he was. Truthfully, you could probably feel like, you know, some songs it just gets the spirit across, whether you really know, even if it's a foreign language or something, you know, it's just, anyway. But obviously people did know who Nelson Mandela was, but
not very many. You'll be surprised.
Really?
No, no, sir. No, a lot of people didn't know who. At least, no, he wasn't that well known. But thanks to the specials, worldwide recognition.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to ask you, how did you find the Arizona-based ska band Extremes? How did you come in contact with them?
I'm glad you asked about them.
And Arizona, of all places.
You know, it was crazy. I basically, I mean, it was the funniest thing. I mean, literally when we opened, there was really just the Boxboys were the only LA ska band, right? And I just felt like bands would form, you know. We were booking a lot of, you know, soul people, reggae artists. There was quite a lot of local reggae bands, as I came to find out, or were forming, you know. And I got this cassette in the mail from Phoenix. And I just was like, I don't know, it was just, it was so unexpected. First on any level. So I put it on and I'm like, oh my God, this is it. This is exactly
what are you looking for?
What I'm looking for. And so I contacted them. The club opened in May 80. And I got that tape probably about a month later. So it was, the whole thing was just beautiful, you know. And they came in July, and Bill Bentley, who's going to be with us on the Grammy panel, was LA Weekly music editor at the time. And Bill had come from Austin not that long ago and was, you know, just coolest, soulful, lovely guy, and just gravitated to the Unclub. So he wrote this piece for us about the extremes. There was a thing called scoring the clubs back those days, because literally our budget was $40 a week. We had a little ad in the LA Week, that was it, and flyers, you know. And that was a powerful thing, you know. It's obviously, we're pre-internet days here, you know. It was very much like you'd read that stuff and see what was going on every week. That was what you would look at. And got there that night, well, obviously that's sound check, but you know, I went back down after sound check. It was like a line round the block before we'd even opened.
So how did people know about them? But just by the ad?
No one knew about them. Like, no one knew who they were. They'd never had a song out. They'd never played a gig here. They didn't have a record out. They would, you know, send me, you know, just rehearsal tapes, more or less, I think. I don't even think they were demos, but I was just like, you know, dream band. And I think at that point, the club had hit very quickly because people, you know, my big thing was to make it special, you know what I mean? And so we only did, as much as Bob wasn't thrilled about it, I was like, we just need to keep it weekends. You know, when these clubs get every night, it's just, you know, it doesn't mean anything. Make it special. The records that we played, or I played, you knew what you were going to get. If you were into that kind of music, it wasn't going to be something else. You were going to get different record songs every week, but it was going to be in those musical worlds, you know. So
and give us a for instance, what would you play? For those who give us a for instance, what would you play?
You know what I'll do afterwards? I'll send you a little playlist.
No, just for the benefit of the viewers.
No, but I mean, essentially, look, there would be. I'd often start the night with dub, you know, while people were coming in. You know, Big Youth. I love Big Youth, you know, and that would probably be early in the evening. And then as people sort of came and the sort of dance floor, it just moved up tempo, you know. I'd obviously hammer the Specials record, the English Beat. There was a great Spanish language version of Madness is One Step Beyond I got on a flip side of a single, and because we were in a Latino neighborhood and these kids were sort of, you know, kind of curious, so they would come in, and that was just like acknowledgement of them, and Floor went crazy for that. It's a great version. I mean, and they, you know, it's just brilliant. I've been trying to use it in a film for years. Anyway, then we would play the old, you know, ska stuff, original ska stuff, you know, a lot of Trojan stuff, anything, you know, and then a lot of soul, you know, we'd play the Stack stuff, and older reggae stuff, you know, I played like contemporary Bob Marley, obviously, Uprising was out that year. And just, you know, it was sometimes, you just read it, you know better than I do. You've been doing this a lot longer than I ended up doing it for, that's for sure.
No, but I don't think that was happening anywhere else perhaps west of the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing.
You know, and look, Mark's
that sort of mix.
Yeah. Exactly. I don't think so. And I don't think, you know, I mean, I'd like to say we may have been the first club really dedicated to ska, probably not ever, but in that upswing when people started to rediscover it again. And so when the extremes came, there was the crowd were waiting for them. You know, when he wrote the piece, you know, on them, it was just everything coalescing at once. You know what I mean? It was like we were flying them, we were crowded anyway, but it was just it was a huge crowd that night outside so early, and there was just an excitement building all around it. So I think it was good it was a very mutually perfect thing for the extremes and us. And I'm really, really glad you brought it up, because I feel like they're a kind of forgotten band, and they were so great. I'm telling you, like, I wish I had film that people could see, because it was riveting.
Wow. Yes, sir. Which is a fantastic segue. Let's talk about the Boxboys and their significance to the Los Angeles ska scene.
Yeah, I mean, the Boxboys, I mean, look, they're still dear friends, and I've got a deep, you know, regard for them. They had formed, they were playing gigs before we opened. They were the only ska band around in LA at the time, and I'd seen them and really liked them. So we'd already sort of become semi-friends, and their manager, Perry Watts Russell, I was on to the minute I knew I was doing this. I'm like, you need to be in there right away. And they were booked, you know what I mean, to start. So it was like, otherwise I would have opened, they would have maybe been the opening night band, but they were just great. And they're, you know, the spirit of them. And funny enough, during writing the novel, I went back and I was listening to stuff. You hadn't heard it in a long time. You know? Man, this stuff holds up great, you know? And yeah.
What other ska mod groups were around in the early 80s? I know the Targets, from some research I've done, the Skank Whispers, the Untouchables. Am I right in mentioning those
yeah,
as early LA band?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or Southern California then?
Yeah, I don't know when the Toasters formed, so that I'm going to defer on that one.
No, not the Targets, not the Toasters.
Targets, excuse me, I beg your pardon. The
I think that, the Toasters are East Coast. I mean, specifically the Southern California area.
What happened was, in terms of the Untouchables, those guys, I still say kids, and I realize none of us are kids at this point, but they would be club regulars. They were all there on the dance floor, and at a certain point, and I've gone back and forth with this in my mind, and I'm never quite sure whether Terry or Clyde gave me their rehearsal tape, but they were like, we've formed a band, and can we play? And so obviously, we found a date for them, and they were really, I feel like they were next. Most of this was 81. 80, I don't think any of those, I think those bands formed, I know the Untouchables formed in 81. I would probably say the same in that pocket. The Skanksters played a lot. The Untouchables played a lot. Targets played a lot. I feel like that was more, I don't think any of them were the first year. It took a while. Took a little bit longer than I thought, but I guess they were all rehearsing and writing songs.
Right. And what reggae groups did you work with regularly, or so to speak, book during that time?
Yeah, the Babylon Warriors were probably the preeminent band at that point in Los Angeles, and they were already well in existence, and they came and played, and they were just top notch, man. The original singer for that band, I never quite got, I don't know what his life path was, although I know the Babylon Warriors, man. When they had him, man, he was like so charismatic, just on a level, like superstar level, charismatic.
Wow.
And it was a shame because I don't remember how long he was in the band for, but he was just something else. He was Jamaican, if I remember correctly. Most of the guys were from Belize.
Right, that much I can remember.
Yeah, but he was on another level. And they were always a great band. It wasn't just about him. It was just that when they had that great band and him, I was like, they're going to be big,
Wow. Yes.
There was Zephyr and the Raiders, Del and the Sensations. There was, I should have thought about this a bit more. I don't want to forget people, you know what I mean? But
it's not easy.
The Rebel Rockers.
I was going to mention them.
The Rebel Rockers
yes.
Were a great band. And funny enough, I just talked to Princess for the first time in like the odd 40 years about a week back, but she's going to come.
Nice.
Going to come. We've got to make sure we get her a ticket. But they were great. They were really fun, and they were a top notch band. She's a great singer.
Right. And what celebrities attended the Unclub, if you can mention some?
Yeah.
Or did they attend?
The funny thing is, I was kind of oblivious at the time because we didn't compete. Like if someone was getting in because they didn't have the money, like it'd be some kid who didn't have, they'd be standing there with their quarters and not having a right to go and get in. You know what I mean? But we didn't really do. It was very anti sort of. I don't say it wasn't anti-celebrity. It just was. There was no velvet rope. You know what I mean? It wasn't that kind. It was a reaction against all that, and
that was deliberate on your part.
It was very deliberate.
Yeah,
100% deliberate.
That's right.
I didn't want any of it, and we didn't have bouncer inside. We had a guy on the door who really was just making sure people didn't sneak in and go and knock out the ticket window, and there was very little trouble there ever. Not none, but nothing, not the sort of stuff you were seeing around in other clubs at that point. And Lawrence Fishburne used to go. He was friends with some of the Boxboys, so he would go. I didn't find out until like 15 years later, but Jodie Foster used to go and really like the club. And there were like nascent sort of filmmakers like Alison Anders. Most of the people that came like that, I found out about later. You know, I'd meet like 20 years later, go to your club. You go, you did? You know, I mean, because I wasn't really paying attention. You know, I had so much stuff going on. I was DJing. I mean, people would show up sometimes. I remember like Tom Waits and Ricky Lee Jones arrived one night, and I mean, I don't know, you know, I'm talking to, you know, I was trying to think of actors. There were a bunch of other actors when Emilio Estevez and people like that would drive out. And again, some of this stuff I just found out later. But so a lot of those young actors would come, but in a cool way. You know, they were either on a band's guest list or they'd pay to get in. And you know, it was very I don't know, democratic like that, if you want. But yeah, I think that by and large, yeah, the Ricky Lee Jones and Tom Waits one is funny because they got to the curtain. There was like this ratty curtain. You'd pull it, you'd buy your ticket, right, and then you'd pull this ratty curtain aside. You'd walk in, and it was, you know, it was a tiny joint. It was a very low stage. You know, I mean, your bands were, you know, you were more like you could. What was great, like with some like the Extremes, you know, she's eyeball to eyeball with people. You know what I mean? They're singing in your face, and kids would wander on the stage, and it was a relay in there, you know. And so Tom and Ricky Lee Jones out the curtain. She looks at him and goes, like, does this
not upscale enough?
Well, I don't know. She just was like, I want no part of it. You know what I mean? And I mean, I don't know either of them personally. So, but they have this big argument, right? She leaves and he stays. He stayed all night. But you know, bands would, you know, look, we did do a certain amount of promotional things around bands we liked, record releases. You know, we did one for the special second record, and you know, people like Deborah Harry and the Blondie people would come. I don't know if that's as other artists, you know, I'm not talking about actors and how we're defining celebrity, but there was a lot of different people went through there, you know. Weirdly, while I was doing the book, someone had sent me an image that Andy Warhol shot outside there one night. But I'm pretty certain he didn't come in. I think he must have just heard about it and did some pictures outside, because that's what it sort of looks like. But that was kind of interesting to find out all these years later. So honestly, it's hard to say people who are in there, but I'm happily whenever I hear someone else was there, and you know, especially you know, people like Lawrence Fishburne and Jodie Foster. I so admire them as you know, artists and really cool actors and filmmakers. So you know, anyway, but it was a melee, and it was hard to tell who was in there most of the time.
Right. So sadly and regrettably, why did the Unclub close?
You know, I mean, I think I just like to put it like this: is every great club, and I mean, with all whatever, I believe it was a great club, has its moment in time. You know what I mean? It's great. And then time to end, go out, you know, gracefully. You know what I mean? That's how I looked at it. It was time. You know, I'm not saying we didn't have a lot of issues with the law enforcement people and the fire department, because I never stuck to an age limit. You know, I grew up in London. Like, I wanted teen energy in there, and that brought its a fair share of issues and trouble and visits and mayhem. But, you know, at the end of the day, it was time. You know what I mean? It was perfect in its moment, and nice to just remember it that way.
So interestingly enough, from there you went on to become a publicist for several top clients, including MTV, NWA, Jimmy Cliff. It doesn't get any bigger than that. Media relations executive. I think you also work with Bonnie Whaler. Tell us about work also with Polygram Record. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on and on. Talk about your experience and how you make that transition.
You know, I'd done some PR in London, you know, when I left school, and after the sort of club thing, you know, club thing's not exactly the healthiest lifestyle, you know what I mean, on many levels. And so I got a job working as an independent publicist, and I was very lucky. I mean, look, I loved doing it. I was very passionate about the music, and so yeah, Jimmy Cliff was a dream, to have, and Bunny Wailer. Jimmy Cliff, he was managed by his brother at that point, Victor, if I remember correctly, who were just the nicest people, I mean, absolute sort of joy. And I was doing, who else I did NWA for a while, indie. Ian Hunter and Mick Ronson. I mean, I love Bowie and the Spiders from Mars. So, Mick Ronson was it for me and that growing up. So at a certain point, a friend of mine, Sue Sawyer, who when I met during the Unclub days, and she had worked at Epic Records for a long time in the early days. So she got the Clash stuff, and, Cosmo Vinyl would send us the unreleased next tracks to play. And she was like a big supporter of the Unclub. And she was getting ready to leave Polygram, and she got me, basically positioned me, got me. She goes, look, you're doing all this stuff. I was representing Ian Hunter and Mick Ronson were on Polygram, and I was doing them independently because they'd hire independent publicists on certain projects, as was Michelle Shocked. So I went in and met them and got the job and stayed there 10 years,
So you also transitioned into focusing on movie soundtrack, right? Later on.
Yeah, I did.
What was that emphasis?
Well, what happened was I was starting to A&R some bands and English bands, and I'd always had a good relationship naturally enough, because it's like a translator, you know what I mean? It's like a lot of it on every aesthetic and business level, because things are done very differently in England. So I'd always enjoyed that aspect, and some of them weren't getting radio play, well, most of them weren't, truthfully. And that was such a big driver here that I started to explore the opportunities of trying to get them connected with young independent filmmakers. It's like mid-90s now, so you were getting like, Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Trainspotting. These films were starting to pop along, and I'm like riveted by independent film, and I thought these would be nice matches. So yeah, the person who was actually doing soundtracks decided to leave LA, and she left and moved away, and I went to Ed Eckstein, boss at president of Mercury Records, and convinced him to do this wild soundtrack for Greg Araki's film Nowhere, and give me like $200,000 to do it, you know what I mean? And I always said to Ed, he was the only president before, afterwards, during, who would have ever rolled that. But it hit, I loved doing it. We got a ton of bands. This was like 96 into 7. So we had like, the bands of the day, and with no money. I mean, really, when you say that, it's like, everyone was getting, there was about 40 songs in there. Everyone's getting like $5,000. And I just didn't know any better, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You always show up the right place at the right time.
No, look, I know, I feel, look, don't get me wrong, I'm well lucky. I know it.
That's what I'm saying.
I worked hard. I always try and focus.
Of course. Your resume speaks for itself. Mm-hmm.
I think it's like for you, you know what I mean? You have this thing, and that you're focused and you love it. And why would you not do it great? You know what I mean? Why would you not do it great? So I love that world, and I still do. I realized at a point fairly early on that I wanted to be on the other side of it as a music supervisor, partially because when you're at a label, there's this predominance of jamming bands into a film because you're funding the soundtrack. It's very different now in some ways. It is. Obviously Spotify, so many things have changed in that business, but essentially I realized like I had to be pure for the film. And I mean, I can't put a song in a film that feels right. It's like almost physical pain. You know what I mean? If you see a scene to a song, you're like, oh no, this is wrong, it's wrong. So I went out, got an agent who told me I don't know what the language factor is on this show, so I won't say what he actually said to me, but he said, you're F crazy, and took me on, and never really sort of looked back. I love doing it so much, and yeah.
You know, Howard, I'm inclined to believe you've done everything except running for president of the United States. For instance, your novel, when did the idea struck you that you should write a noir novel?
You know, I'd had an idea. Some of the subject for that first novel had been in my head for a long time, and I finally thought, you know, like, if not now, when? You know what I mean? And I really just thought, it was like I wanted to, you know, it's always good to have a new challenge, you know, and filmmaking is very collaborative, which I love. But I thought, well, because people are like, why don't you write a screenplay? I was like, I want to write a novel, you know what I mean? And naively thought it was a very singular thing to do. And of course, so many people help you along the way. But I started, you know, I actually probably, it came out in 2015 and it took me a while to write it. And truthfully, I didn't have a big discipline at that point to write because I was so busy and I didn't, you know, I hadn't done it before. And I would go to like Jake's in Jamaica a number of times and hold up there and wrote chunks of it. You know what I mean? Because when there was no internet there at that point.
Right.
Which was such a, you know, it was good for me because I wasn't disciplined enough to put, there was no TV, you know, so it was like, I would go and I needed to go places where there were no distractions, you know, and learn how to do it. And that's kind of was the process.
Right. So share with us your first book, Once Upon a Time in LA, Rock and Roll Noir Novel. So that's number 2 now.
That's the first one, and Top Rankin's the second one.
Right, which we show Top Rankin in a second. Right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Top Rankin just came out recently, and my sincere thanks for having your publishers sent me a copy. I really appreciate it.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah.
I'm heading to Mexico, so I'm going to take it.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Well, I think hopefully you'll have fun, and you'll definitely get a taste of what the first year of the Unclub was like in there.
Yes,
you know?
I started reading. I I did some reading.
It's a sort of merge of everything, and it's sort of lived in the moment, and I'm really, really happy. I had a hell of a lot of fun writing it, and I, you know, it was exactly what I wanted it to be. It came out pretty much how I wanted it to come out. And I'm always doing this stuff, but like basically Denise Hamilton, who's a crime writer, I met her right as I was starting the first novel in a book signing. She was about to do a book signing at a mystery bookshop. And I told her I was getting ready to write Once Upon a Time in LA, and should I do a group or a class or something? And she remembered, she goes, wait a minute, did you have a club in Silver Lake back in 1980? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, you should write a story about that. And I'm like, well, that's not this book. You know, it wasn't in my head at all to write, truthfully. And she gave me her card back in the day, you know, when I was getting ready to write the first one. She goes, look, most people never finish a Mac book. If you ever get to the first draft, here's my number. And I sent her Once Upon a, she goes, send it to, it took a while, you know, 2-3 years later, whatever it was. I sent her Once Upon a Time in LA, and she really became my mentor and editor, taught me how to get to a second draft, taught me, you know, so much that I figured after that, the only thing you could never, you know, what stranger could ever give you a bigger gift, which she was at the time. So I thought, I'm going to write Top Rankin for her. I'm going to write the Unclub book for her. You know what I mean? And that's how Top Rankin came about, in truth.
Wonderful. We have some fascinating fan questions. So our producer and good friend, Eric
Kohler. Hello, Howard.
Hello, Eric.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this, and it's great to finally meet you virtually. You know, we've all been talking for so long now.
It's crazy, right? Right back at you. And thank you for having me. Seriously, it's been a fun. I hope I haven't got on too many kind of.
No, this is great. This is great being able to hear your life story and you know, hear so much about the Unclub and obviously Top Rankin. And speaking of Top Rankin, we teased it. Hopefully, some of our our viewers and listeners already know, but on Saturday, October 23rd at the GRAMMY Museum in downtown Los Angeles, which is right in the heart of downtown near Staples Center, right on the LA Live complex. It's a very special event, one that we're both really excited about. And obviously, Howard, thanks to you and fellow author and our mutual friend, Marc Wasserman. It's top, yes, Marc. It's top ranking, the Unclub and Birth of the LA Ska Boom. And it's a panel discussion, book signings, and special performances. And again, that's Saturday, October 23rd in the afternoon. It's a 1:30 p.m. doors, 2 p.m. start time. Check out this panel. In addition to, of course, Howard, you and Marc Wasserman, we have both Jerry and Chuck from the Untouchables. We have from the Boxboys, Ivan and Greg, who I know are friends of yours as well, Howard. We have Norwood coming over from Fishbone, Greg Lee from Hepcat, both of whom are obviously so integral and key to ska, not only in the 80s, but obviously to present day. Bill Bentley, who you touched on earlier, right? Former LA Weekly music editor.
Yeah.
And
be great, by the way.
yeah, he's going to be great. We're going to announce one other panelist here in a minute. And then both the Boxboys and Untouchables are going to do very special shows. So the Boxboys, who've not performed in about 40 years since the Unclub days.
Exactly. I can't wait.
Which is amazing. Yeah, they're going to do a short set. The Untouchables will do a short set. We have Mr. Junor Francis here hosting the night, and then coming in from Chicago, none other than DJ Chuck Wren of Jump Up Records. But one additional panelist, which is hot off the press, so to speak.
Yeah, Lawrence Fishburne has kindly accepted our invite.
So great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm so excited. So
I'm very
excited.
And like I don't think you'll mind me saying that he would come under the catalyst of the quintessential Unclub fan who was getting in underage.
I don't want to point out that history and posterity, when we say this 20, 30 years from now, that Eric was instrumental in putting this together. I don't think anyone else could have.
Well, so
and I really and truly have to give him credit.
Like, again, just for unequivocally, and I'm so grateful for you doing this, because it's the sort of thing that we'd sort of had thoughts about these kind of things over the years, and nothing ever happened. And
then Eric makes it happen. So that's why.
Well, no, I appreciate that, and actually want to touch on.
But you're talking when we are giving you credit. Learn how to accept.
All right.
So we want people
to
know that. Yes, right. You have to. Because like Howard said, we talk about these things, but to actually, theory, put it into practice. That's where it becomes extremely challenging and sometimes impossible. And you just said, okay, this is what you guys want. It happened like that. So we want to give you credit.
Well, yes. And when Marc, who we interviewed on a few episodes ago, obviously Marc and Howard had this idea, and Howard, you've had this for a long time, but no, really, really glad that obviously, as they say, it takes a village, but anytime any connections and the couple panels that Junor and I have done at the GRAMMY Museum obviously helped open the door to this. But this is the first time we're doing one that has so many different layers. And really, when we talk about the history of LA Ska, we're talking about pretty much the formation of it in this instance, right? I mean, between what you did at the Unclub and having the Boxboys, I mean, it doesn't go much further back, if anything, before, let's be honest. This is an afternoon event, all ages, which is extra special. Tickets are only $15. GRAMMYmuseum.org has all the information, including the COVID protocols. Obviously, we're all going to be really, really safe on this event. So we're super excited about this. Howard, how did you and Marc meet?
Well, Marc actually had found me when he was starting to research his book, and I was writing Top Rankin. And I will say this, and I haven't met Marc in person yet, which I'm so looking forward to. And truthfully, his book is just mind-blowingly good, and I'm giving a plug for it right now, because even the chapters around the Boxboys, the Untouchables, who obviously I've known since the day, I'm learning stuff that I didn't know, and is what was great about with Marc was we had fantastic conversations and hit it off, but it was also like we were like, it was good for me to have a target. I was like, okay, let's just both do this. Let's get it out. Well, we were thinking like 2020, because that would have been our 40th anniversary, but 2020 kind of went away. Not because we hadn't finished. I finished, but what it was like, I felt like almost responsibility to keep writing. Like I wrote every weekend, Saturday, Sunday, all 2019, 8 hours a day. I wanted to get this novel done. And
sure.
I'm grateful for him, and I think for both of us it was a mutual support thing, and to a degree Aaron as well, but Mark and I were in very constant contact,
right?
And it's been a blast. It was a total blast. So.
Yeah, well, and this event is also really special. Both you and Mark will be not only on the panel, but you'll have books available for sale at the GRAMMY Museum. Fans, if you have your books, you can bring it there, but they're going to sign, do autograph signings. So it's a wonderful afternoon event there.
Yeah, I'm so happy to sign as many people. If you've got it already, don't feel weird bringing it, because you don't have to buy another one. I mean, you could buy another one for a friend, of course. If I probably should have said that, because the publisher will be thrilled to hear I just said that. But like, truthfully, anyone who's got one, bring it on down, and we'll sign you up.
Yes. I'm going to ask you a question about this book here in a minute. Mark, speaking of Marc Wasserman, he had a question he wanted us to ask you.
Okay.
Not to put you on the spot with this, but during the On Club days, what band that played there was your favorite? And it could be for any reason.
I don't think I can do that. I can't do that.
All right.
There were nights, and there were so many nights that I really, I am being diplomatic to a degree, but I'm also being honest. Like, I couldn't pick between
it's fair.
Some really memorable nights, and a lot of them come back, as the catalyst of writing and stuff, and brought a lot of great smiles back on so many different levels. But look, there were some great bands there, and there's not been enough notoriety outside of the Untouchables for so many of them, and I'm really appreciative of you guys doing this, and really from the heart, for like the Extremes, and I know Rebel Rockers have obviously had a long career, but some of the bands that kind of came and went that were really too good to have come and went, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, true. So speaking of your book, which I thoroughly enjoyed and loved, and I can't say that I've read too many books like this where part fiction, part nonfiction. But how do you choose what to? And this is obviously a general question, or you can get as specific as you want. But how do you choose what to keep true, right, versus not? And the other thing is that, and we talked about this off camera, but the way that it transported me back when you mentioned what the DJ was playing, or what somebody was listening to, or you talk about, not to give it away, but talks about Marley when he was diagnosed with cancer, but so many true to life, or so many things that kind of put me in that moment. But obviously there was this other things involved. But like, how do you in general go about choosing and deciding? Like what's your process?
Obviously this is a very strange book to write, in the sense that it's it's obviously a big chunk of my life, and to fictionalize it, I don't really, I love noir genre, and I've always thought the music biz was rife, perfect setting for noir stuff, and there wasn't much written from, there were a lot of band bios, things like that, but not much written from a fictional but music business point of view, and this one is more street. Once Upon a Time was more inside. A lot of people were already involved in the record. These kids are like trying to come through. What I wanted was an authentic taste of 1980, right? So I wanted it to be like kind of lived in the moment, with none of this sort of going, oh, how cute, there's no cell phones, there's no, just as it was. But you need a sort of catalyst for a story.
Sure.
And so without breaking it down, I needed fictional artists to sort of drive that. And 1980 really played nice you know, as I was writing it, because so many real things were happening that were color it, and in some places have a plot aspect to them. And so, you know, you'd got like Ronald Reagan running and, you know, for president, which seemed as unlikely as a certain other person getting time. You know, it was like this cheesy, washed up B-movie actor, you know. And, you know, there's other elements, you know, that was truthful. And in order to illustrate the truth of them, I needed to have fictional characters to live that truth that was authentic to what was going on. But, you know, some of it's painful stuff, and some of it's fun, and some of it's dark. And, you know, it just needed the characters to populate it. But, you know, yeah, it sort of chose itself. I mean, I know it sounds corny, but I think a lot of writers feel like once you start writing, certain characters kind of take over books, you know, the things drive you, and you just channel it all along.
Right.
You know, so it was yeah, I mean, when I look, it's always strange when you're writing, because in the moment, I'm just, like I said, I wrote it to a real discipline. It was just flying out of me. I mean, I had so much fun writing it, and I don't know how much detailed thought. I wrote what felt right.
Sure.
And that's what it ended up as, you know. And it's the only funny thing for me is people are speculating endlessly on various aspects of what's real and what's not, which I'm totally good with. I will say,
yeah, that's kind of the fun of it too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And look, there is a lot of truth in there, a lot of stuff. So it's certainly authentic if you want to look at 1980, and there's the fictional aspects were as needed, you know.
And the playlists or the music that the DJ in the book played, was that pretty on this? no pun intended, but was it pretty on par with what you played?
It was exactly. It was,
okay.
You know, I was like, you know, look, it was exactly that.
Okay.
You know, I know the songs, and, you know, obviously there's some stuff, just peripheral stuff to what was going on in Los Angeles at the time. So you do hear some other songs when you're not at the Unclub that were also what was going on. But yeah, it's funny, I got a very vivid memory, and I actually kept a journal that year, but I had to look through it just to check a few dates here and there. So it's really, I didn't use it as much as I thought I might. I ended up, but I looked through it at the time and pulled, you know, just little memory triggers here and there.
You know,
through what comes back.
Yeah.
You know, I have your journal from 1980.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing that you still have it and you haven't lost it.
It's funny, I got like 80, and there was a booking, like you know, my booking thing, which was so scattered, but like just bands scrolled through, you know.
Wow.
So yeah, it was.
I wonder how many of those phone numbers are still valid too.
Yeah, it's funny, really, right? I mean, there was not many area codes going on then. Let's put it that way.
True. Yeah, no, this is a wonderful read. How can our viewers and listeners pick up Top of?
Really, you can get it anywhere. Like, I mean, it's certainly on all the kind of big sort of places where you order it. You know, I'm always trying to push people to buy from their local bookshops, you know, especially these days, to support them. So if you're in LA, as I guess a lot of people are going to come to this, will be, or most people are, you know, Book Soup for sure has been great, and I love Book Soup. That's my favorite bookshop, but you know, anywhere should have it for you.
And how is the sale going so far? Are you pleased with it?
You know, I haven't heard lately, but it seemed to be out the gate pretty well, and lovely reaction. I mean, honestly, like I gotta say, just from a mix of people who've written to me, and some, you know, some friends from the era that I've been out of touch with, who, you know, I've had the best response to it. I'm honestly, I'm kind of almost, I don't know how to put it, but I'm very emotional about it, because it's been everything I could have hoped for in that respect, in terms of people getting it.
It's like giving birth.
Yeah, and also sort of, you know, hearing from people again, like you conjure up the past, and past, you know, in a lovely ways has popped back up to come for a visit and conversations with people, and it's been
sure. You've also just going a little backwards. Junor touched on some of the publicity and music supervision, but you also work with Richard Branson, correct?
Yeah, V2.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. It basically, funny enough, I'd just gone out on my own. Like I said, Brian Louts at CAA, who became my agent for many years, taken me on. And like, I got a call from Kate Hyman, who's a pretty legendary A&R woman and a great person. And they were looking for someone to go and do their film and TV. And I really had no interest. I was like, I said I'd go meet them because I felt that was just, I didn't know Kate and I'd always heard about her. So we met, and I met her and Dan Beck, who was president, who had been at Epic back in Clash days, and fantastic guy. And I really wasn't intending to do it. Honestly, I was like, I had my films. I was doing Larry Clark's Another Day in Paradise. I was doing Greg Araki's Splendor. I was busy.
Wow. Yeah.
But it was something new, and the record companies at the time, and continue to a degree, to be like these big ocean lines. You were trying to change something, and it's like you can't change direction. That's there was a lot of things that came to pass that I could, to some degree, could visualize coming to pass. So when they had amazing artists, they just played me all this stuff, and I was like, oh my God, you've got these great things. So I went to work there. I convinced them that I was like, Santa Monica would be a great spot to have a little office, you know what I mean? Because I'm living out in Malibu, and they were like, well, maybe Silver Lake. I'm like, people are moving here. It's funny, I've come clean on this story, I think, to Kate and Dan before, but basically, weirdly enough, after we started our little office, all the companies did start moving to Santa Monica. Universal, Sony.
Yeah, sure, so many labels, right?
But anyway, to the point was we got this great little place right on Ocean Avenue, Arizona, this old little house. There was 3 or 4, because the company was based primarily in New York. So there were 3 or 4 of us out in LA. Brilliant little office. And Richard Branson was not super like hands-on day to day, but he would show up periodically, and I've got lovely memories actually of like he'd show up and he'd come off his Virgin flight, and he'd bring some of the people who were working on the flight with him, come down for a visit. It was great. I mean, it couldn't have been formal, and it was a really great couple of years.
Yeah. I'm sure that was a good experience.
And I got to work with, Kate had bought in the Moby record Play.
Okay.
And I remember she sent it to me, and she hadn't actually signed. Moby had been dropped by Elektra, and staggeringly, and he'd made this record, and I was like, oh my God, like for my world, I was like, this is staggering. And we had an incredible run with it. It was like, very selective. It's like, I think for any of our world, you only want to call people when there's really tell them to, you got to hear this, you've got to be very selective with that. And I'd got hold of heads of music at, the different studios. I was like, I know you're playing this on your car in your office while this one needs to come home, and we just went mind blowing on film and TV stuff. I mean, every song of that was licensed for film or some visual media. Moby, it was a lovely experience. So I'm very grateful for that time there. Honestly, I hadn't intended it, and it was just one of these nice surprises.
Yeah, no, I can imagine it was a great experience. Question for me, because I obviously now with so many streaming platforms and services, and obviously video games, a lot of people are discovering music that way. Clearly, my wife and I, between the Netflixes and the Hulus and Amazon Primes and HBO and all that, and I'm amazed, and I find myself Shazamming, right? Like, what's this song? So often, because I don't want to wait until the end credit. But you as a music supervisor, how do you decide? Because you touched on it earlier, how obviously you are very specific, but how do you decide between, like, in a given TV show or movie, to place a classic tune, right? And obviously you have amazing taste in the classic, heritage or vintage music, so to speak, that we talked about earlier, but like versus some of the newer music. Obviously, I know I would imagine it's situational based, but how do you, what's your process like in that sense?
Well, you know, when I'm doing a period film, you know, to cover that first, my biggest obsession is to be absolutely authentic, like literally to the month. Like
Okay.
we were doing Mike Mills' 20th Century Women, and Mike, you know, grown up, you know, Santa Barbara at that time, and you know, he was, yes, it was very much a sort of, you know, we both had our stuff to get done, but I was like, he was like, oh, can we use something from London Calling? And I mean, we didn't have much money. It was a normal drill, you know. I was like, wait a minute, they didn't come out till Christmas in England. It was January, and we're in July. And
wow, yeah.
It was like, I hate it if I see a film where it's even a great song's used, and it's not the right, you know, and it's like you're trying to do a period film. You want it to be authentic. You don't want one thing to pull you out. So and I'm about to start, so I can't talk about it yet, but I've just had this long conversation with a very cool filmmaker. We're about to do a great film together, I think. And at any rate, it was like, you don't really want to use the cheap in the sense of easy, emotional, easy thing. I'd rather have an authentic song from any given year that you haven't been hearing since. You go right to the moment where the filmmaker wants you to be, not because you've been hearing this song on the radio and you remember this, that, or the other. I think, and I'm not saying, you know, it has to be never heard of, but you don't want things that have just been in the current ears forever.
Sure.
So the flip side is, you know, the Sex Life series I just worked on for Netflix, we were very about new. And there are some flashbacks in that series. So there was authentic things from, you know, 2010, 12 era. But, you know, Stacey Rukeyser, the showrunner, was incredibly open to the new. And if it was emotional and it worked, that's to me my biggest criteria. Yeah. What would this character be listening to? First of all, you want it to feel authentic for the, you know, the period thing we covered. But in terms of the now, you know, you have to try and sort of get in people's heads a little bit and just think about these characters and what their background is and what they would be drawn to. And then the rest of it's emotion. You know, you want to feel emotion that's real. And that show was like, we had an incredible time. It was great to just be all over the place with new stuff. And, you know, there's some things you'd heard of for sure, but, you know, there's just great music out there. So I'm kind of like, it's very situated.
Okay. Yeah.
I put it this way, I don't look to put an old song in a contemporary show unless there's some awfully good reason for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, that's fascinating. We want to remind our listeners and viewers, Howard Paar has Top Rankin, a punk ska noir novel, which you can pick up on, hopefully at your local bookstore. You can pick it up online. Yes, online, or you can come to the GRAMMY Museum if you're Los Angeles based, or you want to take a little trip down here to Los Angeles on Saturday, October 23rd in the afternoon. Doors at 1:30, 2 p.m. start time. It's Top Rankin, the Unclub and Birth of the LA Ska Boom. It's a panel discussion, book signings, and very special performances. As part of the panel discussion, we have Howard Paar here. If you want to, even though we touched on it quite a bit, but we've literally just scratched the surface as it relates to the Unclub, because we definitely want to leave a lot of that discussion for this panel. So to hear a lot more about that really important club and the scene that came out of LA at that time, come on out. Marc Wasserman, who is a musician, podcaster, and author of Ska Boom, an American Ska and Reggae Oral History, another really important book if you're a fan of the music that we all love and appreciate so much. Jerry and Chuck from the Untouchables will be on the panel, as well as Ivan Wong and Greg Souders from the Boxboys, which I'm personally really excited to finally see them. As well as Nord Fisher from Fishburne, who used to go into the Unclub, and Greg Lee, who's a friend of ours from Hepcat, as
and I
well.
can't wait to meet Greg because
Yes.
like I said, I never knew that he formed the band and he used to go to the club. So that's like double exciting because I love that band.
Yeah, yeah. Greg is such a wonderful human. Bill Bentley, who you mentioned earlier, who is a former LA Weekly music editor and author of Smithsonian Rock and Roll Live and Unseen. And I know that you've known Bill for a long time. And then one additional very important panelist, Howard.
Lawrence Fishburne.
That's right.
Excited he's going to come and this with us. It should be fun. I'm very excited and that's definitely a place to get your book. Come on down, you might as well get it so we could sign it right for you.
Absolutely, please do that.
Especially for people who pop in that we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah,
great.
It'll be a little reunion, I'm sure. All the details at GRAMMYmuseum.org. It's an all ages affair. Junor Francis here is going to host the night, or the afternoon rather, and DJ Chuck Lynn from Jump Up's coming out. So,
did you mention the performance to be?
Maybe I didn't this time.
No,
Thank
I don't
you.
think you did.
Very special performances, one time only. Boxboys, first performance in 40 years, as well as the Untouchables, a very special performance by the Untouchables. So this is all in the at the downtown LA at the GRAMMY Museum. So, so Howard, as we wrap this up, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you would definitely want to make sure that viewers and listeners know about?
No, I think this was wonderful, and I hope people come and they're going to hear some great stories. I mean, I've heard a few stories that I've been reminded of that I didn't remember until I was reminded of.
Yeah.
Ivan and especially. So it's going to be a fun and just come on down.
Yes, I think so. Miss this event, it will be a mistake of titanic proportion, Howard. I'm saying for fans in LA to miss this. Yeah, they would be committing a sin of titanic proportion. I'm kidding. When we talk about an old school reunion,
that's right.
Never before.
Yes,
never before seen, perhaps anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. And I'm not just throwing out words.
No, this is really special.
You're kidding me? The excitement is really and truly building. Really building.
And there's a little surprise at the end.
Yes, right? Excitement is building. Yeah. So I think we're just about finished.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So I want to ask our viewers and perhaps listeners to follow us on History of LA Ska on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and join our Facebook group. Please follow me on Instagram at Junor Francis. And this series is produced by my good friend here, Eric Kohler, for Rockery Radio. Please follow at Rockery_radio on Instagram for fresh rock, rhythm, and soul and Jamaican music inspired daily playlists.
And Howard, where can people find you on social media?
I'm just my name, Instagram. I think it's weirdly, I think it says at Par Howard, but anyway, it's just my name, same Facebook, Twitter.
Yes. Well, and thank you.
The
so
website, just under my name, has all the book links, and there's
also, great.
The one thing I do want to tell people is there is a Spotify playlist just to sort of sequential with all the songs.
I love it.
In it, and you can go and get a taste of that before or after you read it, but preferably during.
Yes, a great, wonderful soundtrack. And thank you not only for sitting here with us today, and not only for the in advance of October 23rd, but just for everything that you've contributed to the LA scene. With such a vital and important part of it, dating back to early on, and obviously everything you've done since then. So we appreciate you and thank you for everything.
Thank you right back, guys. This has been fun from top to bottom, and it's going to get funner soon.
Yes, more to come.
I think you've proven to a lot of people that the sky's the limit. The sky's the limit.
Oh man, I'm going to take you right back to the inspiration you gave me at the top of 2020. That's all I could say. I'm just, right back at you.
Yes.
Well, Junor, and thank you so much for everything, and thank you for all of our listeners and viewers. You can find on our YouTube channel previous interviews like the one that we had with Marc Wasserman a few months ago, as well as a lot of players that are on stage and, as Junor mentioned, behind the scenes. So we thank you all out there. Howard, have a wonderful rest of your day. Junor, thank you. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.